everybody, and welcome to a very special edition of the American Guns and Freedom podcast with special guest, Wyoming Gun Project, right?
Yeah.
Let's try that again. Hey, everybody, and welcome to a very special edition of the America Guns and Freedom podcast. We've got a very special guest today, Wyoming Gun Project, and he's going to take some time here, first off, and explain to us what he was showing in his video the other day, what he thinks it means, what he thinks it shows, and what it means for SIG overall. So I'm going to give you the floor and let you talk for whatever time you need here to tell us about your video.
Okay, thank you. So basically what I was trying to replicate was the FBI. If you read the FBI report, in figure 11 and 12, they indicated that there was uneven wear on the sear and a ridge on the bottom of the striker hook. So for folks that don't know out there, strikers, especially striker fire guns, they can have what's called sear or striker perch, which is it not engaging fully like it's supposed to. It can engage on the edge, what, old timers used to call a hair trigger. They'd be like, watch out for that one, boy, it's got a hair trigger. Well, that's because it doesn't have full sear engagement with the striker hook. So I explained the video, and let me just say this aside. When I filmed the video, I put a disclaimer in there because I asked people, I know it's 40 minutes long. I know it's boring. I know that there's a lot of measuring and all that other kind of stuff in there, but it explains a lot of the questions on why I did it the way I did it. But basically, I saw some videos online of people, and if they go back, side note, if people go back on my channel, I have been along with a lot of other channels, been trying to run down the possible alleged problems with the P320, and I got about a half dozen videos on there, and I've gone down other rabbit holes. And I saw a video where somebody had put the firearm on a table, set a little bit of pressure on the trigger, and tapped the slide, and it released the striker. I said, that's interesting. I wonder if there's a way where I can set the striker up to mimic what the FBI found in the report, and to take the human factor out of that. Meaning, I wasn't sure how much pressure I was putting on it or going to put on the trigger, or I wasn't able to measure it. I wanted to be able to measure it. So I went over and grabbed the first P320 that I have. I have 3, by the way. And spoiler alert, the other 2 don't do it. A video is going to drop tomorrow, probably, explaining that. So 2 out of my 3 P320s do not have that problem. That was the first one I grabbed off of the shelf. I replicated the video, what I saw in the video, and it actually did it. And I said to myself, okay, what was that, me? Did I actually pull the trigger? I got to have a way to measure this. So I thought maybe I could put a zip tie between the trigger and the back of the frame, or a piece of string or something. And I came up with the screw, and the screw worked out well enough to be able to tune a little bit of, to add or take away engagement from the sear and the hammer hook.
And that's what I was sure people understand here real quick. You're not just taking up the slack in the trigger. You're actually pulling the trigger a little bit beyond the slack, right?
Correct. Because the other videos were showing that there was pressure on the trigger. Also, that was one of the ways to actually pull the trigger a little bit. And somebody pointed out to me, and it made a lot of sense. If I put a millimeter of input past the take-up, past the, and I'm actually touching the wall, the first indication that you can feel resistance on the sear. If I'm actually going in a millimeter on that sear, because of the way levers and engineering that works, it's actually less on the sear than a millimeter. There's some kind of math problem that somebody was showing me.
Well, it depends on how the sear is connected to the trigger bar.
Yes, absolutely. So the reason I was...
It can be more. It can actually be more.
It can be more, yes. And I was trying to simulate without damaging my gun. As you so clearly pointed out, you would have to either replicate the damage that was found on the Michigan State Police firearm by the FBI, or I would have to get a hold of that gun, and that wasn't going to happen. And I didn't want to destroy my P320. And so I said, how can I get it to replicate sear perching basically kind of like a hair trigger, and see if I can touch the slide like it was done in the video and have it release the striker. I had no preconceived notion that it was actually going to fire the round. That's why when you see it in the video, the first one that goes off, that's real. I was surprised because I had been going down these 320 rabbit holes like a lot of other channels trying to figure out what was actually going on. And I was never able, you've seen the videos where they were sticking the stuff in the back and releasing the striker, like LFD channel, I think it is.
Yeah, I did that in some of my
Okay,
tests.
yeah. So, but so I had gone down those other rabbit holes, but you can't replicate the sear perch by sticking it in the back. So the only way I could do it that I came up with, without doing damage to the gun or sticking the little thing in the back. And when I did that, I was not able to get them to fire a primed case. And it was a primed case. It wasn't live ammo. So I had come up with that.
I forgot to denote that in my video. I had filmed a little segment that I could show that this is what it looks like with a primer.
Right.
Like he's using, and then I hope he's pointing it in the right direction. And because I failed to edit that in, it looked like I thought you were using live ammo. I knew you weren't using live ammo. I just used live ammo because that way nobody could say I was faking anything.
Right. Right. I know people say, it was funny. I heard stuff like, oh, it's a green screen or it's AI. Listen, I'm 51 years old. I can barely use this phone I'm talking to you on. I don't know how to
I'm almost 60 and I can do green screen.
I can't. Technology and I do all my videos on my channel from this phone. I got a basic little editing app.
You can nowadays. It's just like that. You can do everything from your phone these days.
Yeah. So green screen, and I faked it. I think one of the problems was that a lot of people took that first clip or some of and I kind of knew, that's why I put a disclaimer in the front of the video. I kind of knew people would probably just race to the end or, do whatever. And I think there have been people that have just clipped parts of it. So they cut out where I explained that I'm using primed cases. So they only
go to the part where they want to say this proves the gun is dangerous.
Say that again.
So they want to skip to the part where they can use it out of context and say this gun goes off on its own.
Right. Or on the other hand, the folks that want to say I'm faking it or this doesn't show anything or stuff like that. So that's what it was. That was all real. That was all my real first reaction. And what I did is to grab people's attention, I took that reaction. So I did the little test in here. I figured out, I said, okay, I can fine tune, and you'll see it if whoever out there watches the video tomorrow, we'll see I do a more in-depth explanation, and I try to get all the three P320s that I have to just do 1 millimeter into the actual sear. And the other two pistols, excuse me again, will not go off with manipulating the slide. I have owned that pistol for 8 years. I bought it from a very good friend who has since passed. Old man Gigi was his name when I lived in Virginia. He used to compete in IDPA and USPSA with us. He was getting out of the game because he was getting old. So you want to buy the gun? I said, yes. Okay, he had sent it in.
I want to remember that. So we'll write that down. You keep going.
Remember what?
That you bought it from a guy who shot, what did you say he shot?
IDPA and USPSA with it.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a good friend. I've known him for decades. I shot competitions with him. Now, he did not shoot a lot. That gun when I purchased it, it did not have a lot of rounds through it. I have not put a lot of rounds through it. Honestly, in the 8 years that I've owned it, I don't even know if I've put 1,000 rounds through it, to be honest. I don't shoot the 320s a lot. He bought the gun, sent it in for the voluntary upgrade. That gun does have the voluntary upgrade. He had a gunsmith install night sights on the top, and then he had the same gunsmith Cerakote the frame. That's it. It has not been modified. Doesn't have custom parts, none of that kind of stuff. It sat in my safe. It was actually my home defense gun for about 5 years while we lived in Virginia. I just moved out here 3 years ago. And it sat empty chamber, striker down, magazine loaded in the gun for years in my closet. So like I said, that was the first one I grabbed out. it exhibited the same issue. So I went to the tabletop, I filmed that part where I showed that I could repeat it and I could measure everything. That was my main goal. I wanted to measure all that kind of stuff and be able to set it where the human finger wasn't in, because people will say, oh, when you rock the gun, you pulled the trigger, and that's what did it. So that's why I went through the whole thing. And in the video, I also state that it was able, on the tabletop part, that I was able to drop the striker with that. Not that it would fire, because I was fully convinced, due to the other tests that I did on my other 320s with the little punch, that the safeties would work. That's why when it went off in the garage, I was surprised, because I knew when it went off in the garage, I was fairly convinced that the striker would fall. But I wasn't convinced that the safeties would fail. So when it went off, I was like, oh, crap. And I only brought one primed case. As you can see, I'm a reloader. It's two Dillon 650s and a Dillon 1050. I've been reloading for 30 years.
I just pulled rounds for mine.
Yeah, I reload. So can you show ammunition in the live stream, or they don't do that either? They're not, that's not kosher.
I don't know what they can show.
I won't try it then. So I took a case, ran it through the first stage, which resizes it and deprimes it, and then I added a fresh primer. I only took one upstairs because I'm in my basement, so I had to go upstairs. You see me in my garage, and the reason I went in there, now I'm on 30 acres. I shoot on my own property. I would have gone out to my range, but it was getting late in the evening, and I tried to get the lighting, and it wasn't working because the sun was going down. If you see in the first segment where it discharges the primed case only, not live ammunition, guys, for whoever is listening. Excuse me, I gotta take a drink.
People don't pay attention. It's like even in my video where I'm showing, I'm using live ammo because you see, I'm not faking this. I'm on a range. I'm shooting it at a berm. And I'm trying to make the trigger fail. Someone says, oh, now he's had an ND. I'm done with this channel. I'm like, ND, you moron. I'm trying to make it fail.
There's so many people. I got AI, all this, they just don't understand the way guns work at all. So the reason I ended up going into my garage was because the sun was going down, kind of like it is now. The sun was very orange, and I was blocking it out with my garage. I had my garage door open. If you go back and look, you can see it. So it goes off, and I was surprised. And I said, let me go back in the house and get 4 more cases, because if I could replicate it 5 times, that would be something. You could just do it once, but if I can replicate it, that might mean something. I had to come back down here, reload 4 more cases. I go back upstairs to my garage, and I got a black screen on my phone. And I said, what the heck? So I'm tapping it. It died. It ran out of battery. I wasn't paying attention. So I go in the house and I charge it for about 20 minutes. I come back out and film the last 4 casings going off. And just a side note, I don't hate SIG. I own 5 SIG handguns. I can't even count the amount of, I have lost count of the amount of SIG products I have owned in my life. I currently own 5, a 229 and 357 SIG, a 230, and 3 P320s. I don't hate SIG. I don't want them to go out of business. I don't wish anything ill will on them, and I don't want them to go out of business because it'll affect their employees and all kinds of other stuff. Now, that being said, I do not like the way they are handling this situation from a PR standpoint. I felt, and I made videos about it, that on March 7th, when they came out with that statement, that they were gaslighting anybody who believes that this is a real thing. I believe, that's just my opinion, I believe this is a real thing. With that being said, I also believe, and have never stated, that this affects every P320. I think it is very rare. I think it takes a certain set of circumstances and, QC issues and tolerances and stuff like that for this to,
Would you say, in your opinion, that one of those circumstances is pulling the trigger to the near break point?
Maybe, and that's the other thing. I never stated, if you see, look at the end of the video, I say, is this what's going on with the gun, guys? I didn't say, I have figured it out. I got it all figured out. I'm right. This is what's going on with the gun. I never claimed that. I can't state that. I don't know that. I think that this might be one possible thing. And let me ask you a question. Would you concede that, even because I've done this test with other guns and you see it in other videos, even just engaging the trigger a little bit, you shouldn't be able to bump the slide. The slop that's in that gun is just...
Actually, that is not actually that uncommon or unusual in a situation like that with that type of engagement of sear, because if you're engaging the trigger to where you've 90% pulled the trigger, you've out of the 7 pounds that needs to interact on the sear, you've already put 5 of them there. And then when you squeeze the gun, you add more pounds to it because you change the position of the slide.
Sure, but I'm not, well, yeah. But see, I would like to be able, also, I wasn't able to fine tune measure exactly what the engagement was.
Yeah.
I would like to know what the engagement was on the FBI gun, if that's an issue. And something you have to,
the FBI was very vague in all their stuff they said.
Well, they have pictures. I'm putting it, I mean, they have pictures of those 2 specific parts. And that was my theory that could be.
Tell you much.
Yeah,
if you read the report, though, they're very vague about what happened or how they made things happen, or even when it happened or whatever. But and remember, during this, feel free to ask me any question you want to ask me about it, because I'm going to ask you some questions right now. Just
okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Easy ones. One of the things you said is you bought this from a guy who used it for IDP,
IDPA, International Defensive Pistol Association.
Now, I'm familiar with IDP and USPA, and I know that it would be surprising to me if people who participate there didn't decide to tune their triggers a little.
No. This was, I agree with you absolutely, because I used to have full custom race guns and stuff.
Yeah.
But this was an old driver's ed and phys ed teacher that taught at Stafford High School, Gigi Snellings, God rest his soul. He was our friend. We had a crew. We would run around. We called him Old Man Gigi. He did not tune anything. He was like in his 70s, 60s, and 70s when he was shooting with us. There was no tuning.
Even my grandfather used to fine tune.
He didn't, because and see, well, that's the thing. I could understand if I bought this from a random guy off the street, or let's say the internet, or this guy was my friend, and I know how much he shoot to it. He did not shoot a lot at all.
Well, since you don't know for a fact whether he even just took a little bit of emery cloth and polished the sear.
No. I wish my friends were here. No. Gigi was not a tinkerer. He was.
But I'm saying, if you aren't able to know that for certain, and you've said you can't do it with your other 2 guns that you bought yourself, and that's never been done to.
Well, I bought the one. I bought the M17 brand new from a local store, so I have an M17. The third gun I bought was a police trade-in. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know the condition.
And it doesn't do it either, though?
It doesn't do it either, because I think this is why. And I could show you these. But being a police trading gun and not knowing the condition, I could see your point, not knowing the condition. I took the gun apart and checked on the springs and all that other kind of stuff. Because a lot of things people will do is not maintain their firearms properly. And you do have to change springs and, clean your gun and all that other kind of stuff. That was one of the problems we had with the Beretta in the Army. That's why they were so clapped out. Maintenance wasn't done properly. I don't ever remember them changing a recoil spring or anything.
When I got them, they were brand new, so we didn't have that problem, but.
Yeah, I didn't get in until 92, so it was 7 years after adoption. But I was on tanks, so I carried one the whole time. But I don't know if this is going to come through on the camera. I doubt it. But these were the recoil spring or the sear springs. It's not come through. That one is kinked and one had taken us
solo.
Okay, let's see if we can. So this was from the P320 that I got as a police trade-in. Can you see the kink in there? Mm-hmm. And then this one is shorter than factory.
Which spring which spring is that?
These are the sear springs from the police trade-in P320 that I purchased about 3 months ago. Mm-hmm. From AIM Surplus. So when I saw that, I said, well, that's a problem, right? Because sear springs need to be fully engaged to keep that sear up so that you have full engagement between the striker hook and the sear, proper engagement. So I replaced those with ISMI OEM weight springs. And I put those in that gun so that it has fresh sear springs in it. And that gun will not replicate the same thing. But I submit to you, sir, that wearing out sear springs and not proper maintenance is something that can make almost any firearm dangerous, depending on what spring it is. if you don't properly maintain it. So that is a plausible scenario where somebody has not changed their worn out sear springs, and possibly by bumping a slide or manipulating some part in the gun, it was able to release the striker. But
I want to ask one question about one thing you said, though, and I'm not attacking you. I just want to clarify.
No, it's fine.
You said that you didn't think it would fire because the safety would engage.
The secondary sear safety. So one thing I've seen you say in your video, and
I'm saying you had the trigger pulled to where that was already disengaged. So why did you think that would?
No. Well, the striker safety was disengaged, but I've seen you say in your videos that you think the striker safety in the P320 releases too early in the firing process. Is that correct?
No, I don't think it's too early. I think it's just the way they've designed it so that it's light and smooth. It's too short of a process overall for most.
Yes, because when you start taking the take up, you actually start actuating the disconnect lever.
It's by the time you hit any resistance, you've already disengaged.
You've already disengaged it. So I believe it's that particular safety is disengaged too early in the firing process. If they were to move that back a little bit in the fire so that it disengages fully right before the safety, that would probably help. But that's, but that I knew pulling that
but that's the whole thing of there's never supposed to be a finger or anything putting any pressure on the trigger. And even if it's just taking up the slack, that's still a misuse of the gun because you're taking up the slack in the trigger. And that would be a bad holster or your fingers on the
for
trigger
that safety. But if you look at the voluntary upgrade sear, they added a secondary sear notch in the back. So you have your primary sear that's like this. Then it goes down, curves, and there's a secondary sear, which was not on the first sear in the gun. That secondary sear is there to try to catch the striker hook if the main sear slips off. That's what it's there for. It's supposed to catch it unless there's a full trigger pull all the way through. And I did not fully pull the trigger because it was staged with it back there.
I'm not familiar with the revamped design, I guess, because I'm not familiar with that process in the seat.
It's much like a 1911. If you ever had 1911 go to half cock, but the 1911s is much bigger. And
we can show a diagram. Do you have a diagram of the piece that you're talking about?
I don't, and I can't pick up a gun. That's
it's one thing we can't do.
If you when we get off here,
it'd be nice to be able to do that.
Yeah, if anybody gets off there, or I can, I think I have a picture that I can send you. I believe I still have it of the pre and the post upgrade sears. Bruce Gray from Gray Guns. I don't know if he completely redesigned it or if he helped design the new sear, but they added a secondary sear safety notch so that if the striker was to ever slip off the main sear, it would catch that before it ignited a cartridge. That particular safety feature failed all 5 times because the cartridge went off.
I'm not even certain that that's how that's supposed to function, because when I read the Gray Guns report, that's not exactly how it was described. So I'm a little confused.
What the purpose of the secondary sear notch?
That little notch.
Okay.
It wasn't meant to take the place of the safety. It was,
No. It's like a backup safety, like a half cock on a 1911. Several guns have.
Yeah, but it's not half cocked.
Well, technically, the half cock on 1911 is not a half cock. That's a safety sear to stop it from going forward and igniting the cartridge and going full auto. Yeah. Like some of the old ones used to do back in the day.
But the whole point would be, disengaging the sear. Now, if you don't pull the trigger at all, that's not going to change the sear in relationship to the gun. If you're not pulling the trigger, it's not going to change the sear relationship to the striker. And when you do that, when you're not doing that, when you're not pulling the trigger, you can't make any of those guns go off, can you?
No. But
here's when the trigger isn't being acted upon, the gun is safe, right?
The only reason I acted upon the trigger to move it up on the sear was
firing pins
to replicate the damage. So if a sear or in this case, a striker hook, have machining marks, chips, any type of manufacturing defect, it can, much like the Remington 700 rifles that had the hair triggers and they had the whole, back in the 80s with the,
Which
it
a lot of
can,
which was over exaggerated, and
sure, but it was, I think they determined it was a real thing. I don't know how much
they
every one of them.
determined it was a possible thing.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you look at the FBI photos, the detailed FBI photos on the striker hook on that gun, there's a little curve, like a shelf that comes out.
Mm-hmm.
There is a possibility that gun experienced sear perch or perching sear or striker where it just hits the edge enough, but it still will function and it still will operate properly, unbeknownst to the operator. Now, if you induce the large amount of movement that's in the slide, it can have it slip right off and fire the cartridge.
Now,
Potentially.
Did you get a chance to watch Rifle and Carbines video where he demonstrates you can do that with a Smith & Wesson 686 also?
A 686 plus? A revolver?
Yeah, you can cock it in any revolver really that works in the same way. You can cock it, and if you pull the trigger enough to where you're doing 70% of the work of removing the sear, you can cause hammer fall by banging the hammer. Now, that won't happen if you don't have your finger on the trigger, but if you got your finger on the trigger, even though you're not firing the gun, you can cause hammer fall by smacking it. Just enough to vibrate the sear off the hammer. So would that make that gun unsafe?
The revolver, the 686 plus?
Yeah.
I don't know. I have to watch the video. I get to see exactly what he did. I mean, you can, a lot of people say
basically what he's doing, and this
you
is
can manipulate any gun to
this
do
is
that.
something you can do. You can take a single action gun, cock it, pull it back to where just a hair before it goes off, and then you can tap the hammer, and the vibration of tapping the hammer, since the sear is already almost removed, will push it the rest of the way. You'll have hammer fall. And it can fire, because since you've already taken up the slack in the trigger by cocking it, you've got the firing safeties off. You've either you've actually activated the transfer bar or deactivated the hammer block, and you can cause that to do that, and you can do it regularly and repeatedly. But the whole point is it requires you, for that to be a risk, that you activate that you deactivate the safety by cocking the hammer, and that you act on the trigger somewhat. So, and then that can happen.
Okay,
so
I'll have to go watch it. But I agree with you. But who would walk around with a revolver with a hammer cocked in their holster? Because I believe.
Oh, you'd be surprised. Some people carry single actions.
But then, that's not safe. I would never do that. Because you could replicate the thing you just, and again, I'll go watch the video, but the thing you just spoke of, you can replicate with a 1911.
Yeah.
Excuse me, if you pull, because I have some 1911s. Look, I love Colt, right? But I give Colt a lot of crap because I think their QC sucks a lot. I've got a lot.
I give every gun manufacturer, if they put out crap, I give them crap.
Look, if you are familiar with my channel at all, if anybody watching this is, I am not a shill for any brand. I don't have brand loyalty. I try to call balls and strikes. I try to call it like I see it. I still like Colt. I think they're an iconic American brand. I have 2 Colt revolvers, which are fantastic, a couple Colt rifles, about 12 Colt 1911s. And a lot of them come with scratches, loose tolerance, a lot of just QC issues. So you could, and one of them or several of them, you could pull the trigger a little bit and feel the machining marks in there, and the hammer will go click just a tiny bit. I'm sure you've probably been shooting for a long time. You've probably experienced that with some 1911s, where if you're very careful with the trigger, it'll just barely, but it won't release, and it'll just hang up on like a machining mark or something like that. So if you pull it enough and bump it, you could probably do it with a 1911.
I don't notice that as much myself because I'm a revolver shooter, so I don't have a what would you call a delicate trigger finger.
Right.
Mine is more of a pull, pull, pull.
Right. And I wouldn't carry a 1911 in a holster with the thumb safety off. Even though you do still have the grip safety, it only blocks the trigger. But I mean,
people do that.
I know, and that's not smart. Listen, the whole P320, all I have never claimed, again, that this is exactly what's going on. And I believe it's a mixture of, I believe some of them are human error with NDs. I believe some of them, based on the examples that I have poor tolerance and tolerance stacking issues. And it could be in a combination with a certain holster, because some people were telling me that those holsters with the lights and all this other kind of stuff grab the slide, which in the demonstration I did, if the holster is holding onto the slide and the frame is able to flex and move, like if a police officer is running or if he falls over or he tackles a suspect, and that type of stuff happens, it could potentially go off if the sear and or the striker hook is damaged. And I think that
if his fingers partially on putting some pressure on the trigger.
Well, no, the only reason I used that was to replicate the sear perching. That's the only way I could figure out how to hold it there and
yeah, but I haven't been able to see
a
gun that actually has an issue of sear purging. Period. So when you're replicating sear purging by pulling the trigger, you're still pulling the trigger, which will
I did, but no, I put pressure on the trigger and moved it enough not to set it off with my finger so that I could stage it.
Yeah,
just stage it there
right before it goes off. And like I said, even in a revolver, you can cause the sear to fail.
So then would you say that if that's the case, because like, again, my second video is coming out tomorrow where I input 1 millimeter on.
That's all it takes.
Is that?
It's like 2.3 millimeters total.
Right. So is that, but guns like Glocks are much more than that. And they have a different fire system because they're classified.
Yeah, they have it is more, but they have shitty triggers.
So with a light trigger, it could be, you could have a potentially more dangerous firearm than I don't know if Glock was testing those guns and they decided to make it the way they did because they knew that if they went with a light single action trigger, because the ATF classifies the Glock as a double action pistol.
Yeah.
The XD, the 320, the PPQ, go down the list, the Echelon, all of them are actually single action where the striker is fully cocked and ready to go. Yes. So
that's why Glock triggers suck so bad.
Right, but they are safer.
Yes,
they are safer.
I tried to make the point the other day to people that the SIG P320, to me, safety-wise and forgiveness-wise, like how forgiving it is to someone who doesn't pay attention, is about the same as carrying a 1911 in your holster without the safety on, but cocked.
Yes.
And I said, that doesn't make it the gun unsafe or faulty. It just means it's less forgiving of mistakes. And you made a bad choice if you cannot handle that. So a lot of these tests people are doing, they're making guns fail in ways that you can probably make any gun fail, as rifles and carbines proved with the revolver. You can make that gun fail almost.
Well, striker fired pistols are a little bit different, and here's why. The frame to slide movement and tolerance,
you have to take that into effect when you design the gun.
Yes, that is a critical measurement. And in the video, for whoever didn't watch it out there, really early on, I show a Taurus G3 that has none of that movement. After this thing got going crazy and people were posting videos and asking questions, I went back and I measured, and I don't remember, I don't have them here, but I took those same calipers and I measured the amount of sear on the SIG P320. And then I went back and measured it on the Taurus, just because when I took the Taurus apart, it looked a lot taller, and it was almost double the sear, double the sear surface, the face of the sear, than the P320. It's almost double. And it does have a crappier trigger. But I think maybe now this is my opinion, I think maybe when they were designing that or whatever was going on with that, they wanted a competition trigger in a duty gun. And that right there, because it's so light, it's almost like it is a 1911 trigger, that stuff can happen. And if tolerances get loose and stuff like that, you're more apt to failure. Now, striker, like you said, like I was saying, striker fired pistol, the fire control parts in a striker fired pistol are in two separate main components of the gun. The striker is in the slide, the sear, the disconnector, all the trigger, everything else is in the frame.
Everything,
Right. So when you increase this distance like this, you are actually moving. It actually affects the engagement between the sear and the striker. Whereas on a hammer fired gun, all the fire control parts are in the lower. The wiggle like those.
And yet you can still make it fail.
You can, but the way to tell that is how it's not critical is like the old rattle trap 1911s. If you can rack the slide on 1911 and the hammer is all the way back, ready to go, and you can disassemble the gun and it doesn't affect it. On striker fire guns, you have to have a mechanism to move it out of the way, whether it's pulling the trigger like a Glock, moving a lever. So that proves that those two, inherently, that's not a very safe design with two separate components. But what the manufacturers have been able to do is tighten up this tolerance. Or in the case of Glock's got a lot of slide wiggle, not as much as my 320s, but it wiggles a bit. So what they did was make it a double action, a pseudo double action. It's partially cocked, or it's not necessarily half cocked.
You're
it's
talking
like
block or the what? What do you?
Right, to overcome all that.
Yeah, it's like
in my videos, I show the Taurus, and then in the new video coming out, I show a PPQ. Very tight. And the Walther PPQ has a better trigger than the SIG P320. And there is absolutely no slide movement in there at all to affect that engagement.
Also, one of the things the PPQ doesn't have is a modular system. So one thing we'd have to take into account when we're moving distance is the FCU changing with the frame.
Absolutely. I don't know that. Yeah. I never determined that. Here is, I have solved, I never said that. I have solved it and I fixed it. No, that's just another, this is another avenue, another clue to a possibility that there might be, that this might happen. Now, I also never claimed, again, that it was every gun. I believe with all the guns that went out there, it's, again, tolerance stacking and issues in a very small number of guns. But they're making guns here, not blenders. You see what I'm saying? And I think they have a responsibility more than like a blender maker to make something that is mechanically safe, maybe even overly mechanically safe.
Well, see, I agree with that to a degree, but then I don't, because I think this is just one of my positions. I almost made a video on this, but I think that the P320 is the victim of the tactitard mentality and the tactitard community, because everybody said, hey, we want a faster gun. We want a cleaner gun. We want faster resets. We want faster rate of fire. We want it cleaner, simpler, etc. And SIG said, here you go. And then they all went bang, 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 because they don't know how to handle it. They didn't really want that. They just thought they were that good.
So that goes to what you said earlier. The Glock trigger sucks. Mm-hmm. I think SIG was attempting to distance himself and say, we will give you a better Glock trigger, because almost every person that I used to shoot competition with, like you mentioned before, was right. Especially early on when I was younger, in my 20s, doing that. We had to buy the souped up Glock triggers to make the trigger better and lighter.
Yeah, we take it from a 3 competition. I always say, if you buy a Glock, that trigger is about a 2 or 3 on the scale of good triggers. Yeah. And if you spend another $800 to $900, you can make it a 3 or a 4.
Mm-hmm.
You're never going to make it a 6.
They're not great, but they're safe. They're safe. So I have a friend, Jason, who runs the Texas Gun Vault, and he's put out videos. He said the same thing you said, and I do agree with you. What you said, SIG gave the gun to people that they wanted. They said, we want a better trigger. We want a competition gun.
Yeah, it is. It's more like it. That trigger weight and everything is more along the lines of and that's why I tell people, don't buy it, don't carry it unless you are so assured in your own ability that you don't make mistakes, because it will not forgive a mistake. And then other people try to say, yeah, you keep defending them and telling people to buy them. I'm like, every time I've talked about it, I've said, don't buy them. I wouldn't buy it. I wouldn't carry it. I would definitely not use it as a carry gun. I'd use it as a range gun. It's like I told my son last night, that P320 right there is a range gun only.
Mm-hmm. I made a video where I asked people, please not to sell these guns until this gets figured out, because I don't want these.
Totally opposite. I think that's hurting the gun industry, and it's creating a whole bunch of nothing, because instead of saying, hey, not most drivers can't drive Indy cars, you'll be dead in 5 minutes. Mm-hmm. Instead of saying that, they're saying Indy cars are unsafe and no one should be able to buy an Indy car. I think anybody who can afford one should be able to buy an Indy car.
No. Oh, absolutely. No. What I'm saying is, but would you say don't sell an Indy car to a 16-year-old that just got his license.
I
You
would
see,
say sell to anyone who's an adult.
right? But the reason I said do not sell them until it gets figured out is if you sell now, if the person is fully aware, and I discussed this in the video, the person is like if watching your channels for all these years and stuff. If I was to sell a P320 to you, I'd be confident you'd know that it's a range gun only because I agree with that, and you wouldn't stick it in your pants and do all that other kind of stuff.
I might stick
But
it in my pants, but it wouldn't be for that.
yeah, we have a lot of people that really don't. There's still, even though this thing has blown up after the airman, has died and all this other kind of stuff. This is now out in the internet zeitgeist out there at this current moment. There
And
are
the airman story, just to touch on it just a little bit, it
Mhm.
didn't make sense to me right off the bat because none of the things people say could happen if it was sitting on a table. And that's what the internet ran with right away. The gun was sitting on a table and went
Well,
off. And
yeah,
I'm like, yet that was not in the news report at all.
right.
People just
Because we
made
don't.
that up.
Yeah, we don't really know. I think that was some inside information that somebody leaked from there, but we don't really know exactly what happened. I agree with that.
It was leaked
How
all right, but it wasn't
right?
from the Air Force. It was leaked from
However,
one of the. It was
if
leaked from
you,
one of the private attorneys of
oh,
Michael Bloomberg.
I'm sure. I don't doubt that at all. I don't doubt that at all. But if you look at the memorandum, there was obviously enough evidence. Again, I don't know exactly what went on, but there was obviously enough evidence to suggest that the P320 was the focus of this incident or accident for the general. They obviously presented enough evidence to the general for him to write a letter saying, pause use of these guns right now. If it had been a suicide, a negligent discharge from another, because that stuff happens, the airmen, soldiers I was in, you were in, we're stupid when we're younger, playing with their guns, and he shot his buddy, they would not issue a letter. So obviously, I don't know if they have security
Well, it
footage of the
depends.
desk where he was at, or eyewitness testimony, or what.
I doubt they have any security footage, but I will say this. That only became a problem when people make the claim that the gun went off on its own. And then they will issue a report to the armory and they'll say, hey, don't issue any more of these until we know what's going on, etc., because this person claims his went off on his own. And that would be standard procedure. Right now, because the SIG issue is so big and everybody's calling the guy, he's probably getting 15 phone calls every second from someone saying, hey, we want you to say that this gun went off on its own on a table.
The general or
the general?
Yeah.
The people in charge. They're probably calling the base commander. They're probably calling the unit commander. They're calling everybody. Trying to say, can we get a statement from you of how this was something that just happened? It went off on its own. Because, and they were like, hey, I can't deal with all this. We're just going to release this statement and we're going to say this is what it is. But actually discontinuing use of something after there's an accident where the item is in question, that's not uncommon. I was in military intelligence. I did investigations all the time. And I would say, let's say if I investigated 10 NDs, I guarantee you 9 out of those 10 times, let's say 8 out of 10 times, someone would say, gun went off. I wasn't even touching the trigger. It was in my holster. It was sitting on my desk while they were fiddling with it, but they leave out that I was fiddling with it part. It was just sitting on my desk and it went off. I actually had one case where the guy claimed it was sitting on his locker and it just fired. It was sitting on a locker and just fired.
Right, because they don't want to get in trouble or whatever.
And
I've seen that
every
before.
time that we did an investigation, 100% of those cases were always proven wrong. The gun did not go off on its own. You lied. You made up a statement. You said something false, whatever, just to cover your ass. So I'm very skeptical when anyone says a gun goes off on its own. And I don't think people should even say goes off on its own. You might, have an ND, might be prone to NDs or something, or have a defect. But even the most effective gun I've ever seen never just sits on a table and goes off on its own.
No, of course not. Well, any car that we see doesn't get drunk and drive on the road and crash into somebody.
Yeah, it doesn't start up and chase down.
It always takes some type of human interaction, whether the human is loading, in this case, whether the human is loading the gun and then sticking it in a holster and you have a defective gun. Because these guns are much like a Luger and stuff. Like if you ever saw Band of Brothers when the guy stuck the Luger in his pants and it went off and shot him and killed. You never carry, and guys like us, you never carry a Luger with the round in the chamber like that, like they used to do back in the day with 1911s. The standard protocol was empty chamber, hammer down, magazine in the gun. You know, they would never carry in condition one. So that's, that's all takes human interaction, just like it does to get into the car and drive and drink the beer. And it's not the car that did it, it's the human being. So, and again, I have never claimed that this is exactly what is going on and I got it figured out. I think this is one piece of the puzzle that everybody is trying to figure out, because I am personally of the belief that Sig Sauer made a major um, social media faux pas with that post on the 7th. It felt like, to a lot of us, they were attacking people and defending their product to make such a bold
Well,
statement like it cannot, no matter what.
I
Well,
understand
yeah,
that. I understand what they were doing, though, because what they said was true. And the stuff people were showing, like even your test, that does not show the gun goes off uncommanded. It shows if you do this series of things, you can make it go off. If you're doing an A, B, C, D, if you simulate A and B and just skip them and do C, well, then you can make D happen. But that doesn't mean A, B, C, D all can happen. It just means if you skip A and B, C can lead to D. And that doesn't in any way imply to me that the guns are unsafe or that there's a default with them. The fact that you can't make it happen when the gun, I haven't seen anyone be able to make it happen when the slide is in a vise. Have you done the vise test on the slide?
no, I don't have a vice.
You just put it in a vise and you just pull back the striker and you take out the return pin, the return spring on the striker, and you just pull it back, let it go, bang, and it'll shoot. But it would shoot if it was around, except It won't, because the safety kicks in and it keeps the firing pin from protruding. So basically by doing that, you're saying, okay, here's the striker slipping off the peg, the little foot on the striker, or here's the sear slipping off the striker, and you're recreating that. I've never been able to see one person yet recreate that without disabling the safety themselves manually, that it would fire, because I did it like 200 times. Couldn't make that little point come through the hole at all. Not once did the striker actually protrude past the breech face. And then as soon as I push in the little safety, disable it manually and do it, boom, striker comes right out the face like it would. So I was able to show in my tests, and I've had several other people I know, like other people do the same test, and they weren't able to make it do that either. So that's saying that if the sear ever failed, the safety would work. And I know the FBI said, well, we were able to make that fail 30% of the time.
Right.
And I am highly suspect of that, because they gave no details of what circumstance that was under, what was happening. Were they saying, 30% of the time we the safety accidentally disengaged because of something or else or whatever.
Right.
And no detail on that, not being able to recreate it at all. And I would guarantee I know more about guns than even the gun experts in the FBI.
Right.
Because the gun experts in the FBI they're just like, hey, Frank, you want to be the gun expert?
The one guy couldn't put the Glock or take the Glock apart on the news that one time.
Exactly.
So I know, and trust me, I'm not trying to brag or anything, but I know a lot too. But I think what that test shows is one statement I don't like is, well, it doesn't happen to mine, so it's not happening. So I'm not an all or nothing type of guy. I don't think the world is black and white. I think there's a lot of stuff right down the middle, and there's subtle shades of gray when it comes to this stuff. And I have admitted that most of the guns, I think, work properly. But I think what the tests are showing, that there are, and I don't know the percentage, I don't want to guess at the percentage, but there's a small percentage of guns that either through poor manufacturing, poor tolerances, whatever, have an issue where if they are sitting in a holster and the slide to frame flexes a bit in the right conditions, it can go off. Much like I don't think
that's been shown, because I haven't seen that happen without pressure on the trigger. So if it's in an improper holster that's putting pressure on the trigger, well, then yes, I agree, you could probably do that. Or even if it's putting enough pressure on the trigger to just be enough, then just a little bit of movement, like doing a draw with a little bit of hesitation, can cause that to happen. That's just the way the gun's designed. If you're acting upon the trigger at all, the trigger.
So which holster then? I agree, there could be input from the holster on it, but which holster does SIG suggest they use? Because a lot of people say,
I'm not saying that I'm talking about which holsters are good. Yeah. I'm just saying that even if it's in a holster If I'm holding the gun right here, right now, and without any interaction on the trigger, I could beat the fuck out of it and it ain't going to go off. Well, then it ain't going to go off in a holster either, unless there's been pressure put on the trigger. And then the real issue isn't the beating the hell out of it. Well, that's part of the issue. But the real issue there is pressure on the trigger. So you cannot have pressure on this trigger, not to where it even takes up off the safety. That's not good. But to go even a little further, then this gun is not, it's going to be zero forgiveness. Bouncing, smacking, hitting, whatever, at that point can make that gun go off, just like at some points you could hit standing up with your cocked revolver and hitting the top of the hammer could boom, knock it off if there was enough pressure on the trigger.
So I agree with you, which is why that tolerance between the slide and the frame is so important. And I have, and again, can't touch guns, but I have quite a few striker fire guns, like I showed in the video, the Taurus, where there is absolutely no slide to frame wiggle or tolerance. They're pretty darn tight for that specific reason, because if in the case like this police trade-in gun, the sear springs are worn out and they take a set, the sear will not fully engage all the way up. So if the sear doesn't fully engage all the way up, you already have an issue. If the gun is brand new and all the springs are good and everything like that, and your sear to striker hook engagement is like this, that's good to go. If you put a bunch of rounds through it and your sear springs take a set and they're worn out and it doesn't reset all the way, it might be like this. Throw on top of that the tolerance of the slide being able to wiggle up and down quite a bit, which my example does. Now with the wiggle, you've moved the hammer hook to right on the edge to that old hair trigger there, and then given another bump, it could slip off. Now, there's also, again, with the sear perch, there's a phenomenon where it sticks in that position. It sticks up here. It doesn't go back down. So once it's up here, it just kind of hangs out there. Because I think in the FBI report, the Michigan State Police guy was out there shooting. I don't remember how many rounds. Apparently, he fired a bunch of rounds, reholstered his gun. I don't know if he reloaded. I don't know if he shot the slide lock. And then he reholstered and walked out, and it went off in front of a bunch of witnesses. Is there video of it? I don't think so. But they were smart enough to take the gun off and not remove it from the holster and do that whole thing. But I know you're a car guy, so I look at the situation like, I know you're a car guy. I know through all your years owning car, and so am I had Corvettes and all kinds of stuff. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you have experienced intermittent problems with your car, where you're like, God damn it, I can't replicate it. You take it to a mechanic, especially with warranty stuff, because I've had that with, and they're like, oh, sir, we can't replicate it. So unless we can replicate it, we can't fix it under warranty. It's required, and you have these intermittent electrical problems. I had that a lot with a 2004 Corvette. You have intermittent electrical problems or whatever, and you're like, I'm not crazy. I know there's something not right with this car, but it doesn't happen all the time. It happens at random times, and you're trying to figure out and run it down like a mechanic. You take it to your mechanic, and he's like, I can't figure it out, man. Bring it back. It does it again. You call him. You're like, damn it, it's doing it again. All right, bring it on in. I'll take a look at it. I'm sure that has probably happened to you. I think it's an intermittent issue.
But I don't see that being relative to this gun. I think the issue with this gun is more your wife is saying that the car is thumping.
Uh-huh.
And you can't replicate it. She can't replicate it. The mechanic can't replicate it. But every time she drives it, she says, oh, the car is thumping, or it's pulling to the right. That's why I'm hitting the curb. Mm-hmm. It's pulling to the right. You can't make it do that. So if my wife came and says, or if your wife came and said to you, I hit the curb because the car is pulling sharply to the right whenever you hit the gas.
Right.
And you go out and it's not doing that. Mm-hmm. Do you believe, oh, it's probably an intermittent problem? Or do you think she probably just hit the curve and that's her excuse?
It could be, but I would go investigate it, which is what I think.
Yeah, I said we would investigate it.
Absolutely, which is what I think SIG is not doing. Either that, or they are not
I think they did a lot of investigating.
Or they are not telling the public. Well, the public perception, and I'm sure you would agree, perception is reality. Okay, so the public perception has turned against them, and the public perception is that they are a big evil corporation. They are not doing any investigations. They're just saying screw us. I don't know if I can cuss. They're just saying, screw you, the end consumer, and our gun is perfect. Just shut up and use it. That's what I took from it. I think that's what millions of people have taken, especially from that statement. I was like, hang on. Most companies, again, I've never seen a company that has attacked their customers and it's worked out for them. Most companies that do recalls, they go, oh, we better get on top of this right away. And I know there are probably legal issues and pending court cases and all this other kind of stuff that might prevent them from doing that. But a lot of companies will say, even if they're positive that it's not their gun, they will bring it in, recall it, check it out, do that stuff. TSOS did that recently with 2 of their 1911 models. They said they had some guns go to half cock, and it repeated enough where they said, hey, we're going to issue a recall, send them in.
That's because it's a real issue.
Yeah, that could have been. I don't know if it was a real issue.
Fake issue. You can't.
But see, I don't know if it was a real issue because I have 2 of those guns and I've never had it happen to me. So I did
but it was
it's not happening to my gun. So,
happen.
Yeah.
I mean, people demonstrated it happening. I mean, they didn't come up with, well, if I pull the trigger and then blah, 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 they just showed that it would happen. I don't know what that's about. But as I was saying, SIG, let's just say one thing. They did lots of testing. They also offered as many guns as the Bloomberg organization wanted to do the testing. Because you remember that first big case, even though it wasn't advertised that way, the guy running it was Bloomberg's one of his personal attorneys.
Sure, they're going to jump all over this. I have no doubt that
and they've been on that from the beginning. So that's one of the reasons SIG, the way they reacted, the way they did, is because they couldn't come out and say, hey, Bloomberg is sponsoring this attack. Bloomberg is paying YouTubers to sow the seeds of discontent and suspicion. They're paying some of the major advertising companies that work with some of the biggest channels and having them pass on to their people. Hey, you guys might want to just sow some doubt about the SIG P320.
I have no doubt that is happening in the
information
war
that
we are involved in nowadays. I have no doubt that that's happening.
I know we're the woman in the state of Washington that helps it happen. So
yeah, come on. State of Washington is so anti-gun. I used to live out there. I used to live in Lakewood in '95. I was stationed at Fort Lewis from '94 to '95, finishing out my tour, and then I had an apartment in Lakewood, so I'm very familiar. I used to work in Puyallup for Tacoma Guitar, the factory that was out there. I lived there for 4 years, I think, after I got out of the Army. So they're anti-gun. I have no doubt that happens, but I personally believe. Let me give you my take on this, that SIG had a part to do in that because they weren't proactive enough. Even if there was a smell of a hint of a possibility of this, if I had been running stuff, and I'm not, I would have said, issue a recall and let's figure out what's going on. Because even when they were presented with the drop safety issue, now, I'm sure you've seen all those videos. Do you agree that there was a problem with the drop safety when they were dropping them and they were...
Do I believe it was really a problem, or do I believe it was a possibility?
Do you believe it was real? That's why they issued the...
I do believe that if you hammered on the back of your gun hard enough, the trigger was heavy enough that the inertia could activate the trigger.
Okay, so but due to that, when they became under a lot of pressure, because I remember that, they said they offered the voluntary upgrade program. Yeah. Their position was, our pistols are safe, but if you want it upgraded,
if you're worried about that really rare, chance that could happen.
Yeah. But so they issued that, and there's still guns floating out there. Say that again.
I did not get it on mine that I owned at the time.
So the very first, let me tell you the story. The very first P320 I bought was a full-size 9mm, probably in 2015. So somewhere or 16, a year or so after they came out. It was before the voluntary upgrade program. I was shooting it at the range. The back end, that little cap that holds in the striker assembly, that broke and all the crap came flying out the back. And I'm like, well, that sucks. So I sent it into SIG to get fixed. While I was there getting fixed, they did the upgrade. I didn't ask for it. They just did the upgrade and it came back.
Yeah, they probably had policy that any gun that came in.
Probably.
The upgrade was just a different trigger.
We'll say that again.
The upgrade was just a different physical trigger.
No. The upgrade was they did lighten the trigger. They changed the sear. They lightened the sear, added the secondary sear notch, and they cut a cut in the slide for the out of battery safety to move it. Yes. So they did 3 things that I'm aware of. that you can see on the newer guns. But there's still the older guns floating out there. Like you said, you didn't do it on yours.
No.
There's a channel focus trip that has one. He just bought one, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago, whatever it was. It's the pre-upgrade one. So there's still those pistols floating around out there.
And if they've been upgraded, one of the things you mentioned is a mark that shows that it's been upgraded.
Yes. Yeah. So I think by not issuing an actual recall at that time and still holding the position that our gun is fine, there's no issues with this thing, it's you guys. And like I said, being around gun community, I've seen many ADs when I was in basic training and we were shooting the M9s. A guy almost shot his foot off. It was definitely his fault. He'd never shot a gun before. And, the drill instructors had to separate him from that weapon very quickly. But so human error is definitely a thing. I think gun companies have an obligation to try to take as much of the possible human error out of it as
Well, see, I don't think SIG should issue a recall because a recall implicates that there's an issue. What I think SIG should have done is they should have offered, like, once again, you decide if you want to send your gun in, and we will change it to where your 4.5 pound trigger is now an 8 pound trigger, and it will make it a little safer. We'll make stiffer sear springs. We'll do everything else. The trigger will be heavier. Yeah. If you want to turn it into an 8 pound trigger, we'll turn it into an 8 pound trigger for you. But if you can handle the 4.5 pound, because mine really comes in at 4.5, 5 pounds. They say it's 5 to 7 or something like that. It's really 3 to 5. On every gun I've ever tested, it's like 3 to 5.
I think I measured mine, and I want to say the one where I replaced the sear springs, it was about 6. The M17 was in the 4s somewhere, and the one that I tested was about 5. The 45 that I.
It's closer to, I've had them, one of mine after shooting it for a while was at like 3.75 pounds. This one, the AXG, and it might be partially because it's an AXG, it is just a hair under 4 pounds. Okay. So that's, to me, that anything like that 3.5 to 5 pounds, that's a competition trigger. That's not a carry it around trigger.
And that is, and in my opinion, that's a problem too. I don't think competition style triggers like that should be used as in a duty situation, like a duty scenario. Again, I never claimed that every single ND discharge, whatever, was always just the pistol. I think some of them could be user error. I think a percentage of them are user error. Percentage of them could be failed parts or lack of maintenance, but I do believe it is real.
I believe it's real that people are shooting themselves with their guns, but I think it's real because they can't handle the gun. I haven't seen any evidence of any dangerous thing, because even in the testing of it moves. Well, is the slide really moving in relationship to the FCU, or is the slide and the FCU moving in relationship to the frame?
I measured it. And again, don't quote me on this because I don't have the measurements in front of me and I don't remember it, but I measured the thickness of the rails on the pistol that I could do this with. I measured the thickness, and then I measured the inside cut on the rails on the slide. And there was quite a bit of variance in the two to allow that slop. I then went and did it with a PPQ, and the PPQ, there was like 0.02.
PPQ doesn't have a FCU.
No. But the FCU, from what I felt, the FCU does not move at all in my gun. But you're correct, that could be part of the problem. But if the FCU was
the FCU
if it was moving with the now I can take the FCU out of
because
my gun.
It's attached. The FCU is, the slide is wholly attached to the FCU. It does not attach to the frame of the gun.
Yes.
Period. So movement between the slide and the frame is irrelevant. It's movement between the FCU and the slide that's relevant, and movement between the FCU and the frame is fairly irrelevant, except for the fact if you moved it enough to alter the trajectory of the trigger bar or something like that.
Well, all the ones I have, there's no perceived movement in the frame between the FCU and the frame. I cannot.
But when you take it out and you have just the FCU attached to the slide,
I can try that, and that's a good idea. I will try that and get the measurements, but I can't do it here. I don't think.
Mine didn't hardly move at all. When
But
you
do you
when
have what?
it's slide and FCU, it's Loctite.
Is
It's
that the
pretty
one
tight.
you showed in the video?
That's what I showed in the video.
Is that the only one you own?
It's the only one I own now because I sold
Okay,
my other
yeah,
one.
yeah.
Because like I said, I bought polymer guns to carry them, and I'm
I
like,
think
this
that
is not carryable, so I got rid of them.
I think the one you have, it's an upgraded version. Obviously, I don't know
Yeah,
the exact version. It's very nice, and it looked like it didn't have any slide play in it.
yeah.
Also, I don't know when your gun was made. I think the 45 when I bought, I said I bought it 8 years ago. So it's an older one. And I think that SIG has been known to do rolling changes because there's channels out there. There's one channel that's got like 12 P320s, and they go through and they have cataloged and they're documenting all the parts and series changes and new A1s, A2s, whatever, but they're not naming them that, and they're not indicating on the firearm that this has been changed, this has been upgraded. They're just kind of
That's
silently
fairly
doing
common.
rolling
That's why
changes, which is common. Absolutely, it's
yeah,
common.
why Smith and Wesson has -6,
That what
-7, -8 because they've made minor changes as they're going.
yes,
Glock,
and
everybody thinks Glock only changes when they do the generation changes. No,
Gen
there's
3,
been
right.
intergenerational changes in how they
Mhm.
do sear lockups and how they do this or how they do that, and it's just part of running a gun company. Usually it's to find a cheaper, easier way to do what we were doing before,
Yes.
which I don't think is always best. But
No.
I think to sum it up, I just don't think that anything that anybody's showing is a non-designed feature of the gun. It's how it's supposed to work. It's not a very forgiving mechanism, but that's how it's supposed to work. And if you simulate damage to the sear by pulling the trigger, well, you've still pulled the trigger. So you can't take that
Right.
out of the equation that you pulled the trigger.
Well, I didn't
And
pull it. I didn't pull it all the way. I set it up
but just
to the.
pulling it at all
Yeah.
is not
Well, there's a
it. That's
difference
not,
between pulling it and staging it. I staged it, and again, I
well,
never claimed
but
that's the be all end all. This is what's going on. But I also submit to you, sir, that amount of play in those slides, and again, I'm dropping an updated video tomorrow with the other two P320s they have. They have significant play in the slide, but they do not do it.
but let me ask
And
you this: is the rule don't put your booger picker on the trigger, or don't put it on beyond this portion of the pull?
what's that? So well,
I said,
but we've
is
all done it before. I mean, I know I have. I know I can do it with pistols, especially like Berettas, stuff like that, where you're pulling the trigger. Not, I don't mean double action like a Beretta. You're pulling the trigger and you stop and let it go, and then it resets before it actually releases the striker or the hammer or whatever. That is what I would constitute a pull. Is when you pull all the way through the trigger and it releases the hammer from you manipulating the trigger with your finger. With me staging it, and again, it's not a perfect test. That's the best way with what I had in my garage.
well, I mean,
The garage
I
guy.
don't think anyone
You
else
know,
could have done a better test because there's just uh, no way to show that because you still have to pull the trigger. So it comes down to the rule of never touch a trigger if you don't want the gun to fire.
sure.
And
Maybe
if we're
somebody could come
activating it,
up.
and the very fact that we've shown that if you activate that trigger to a certain point, you can make that sear fail. But we can also show that if you do the same thing in a Smith & Wesson 686, you can make that sear fail. So does that mean that that's an issue that people should be concerned by? If you 90% if you 90% pull the trigger, then you can make the gun fail, because the way to stop that is don't 90% pull the trigger, don't
Sure,
0%.
if the trigger, I mean, if the striker, excuse me, if the sear and the striker itself, without pulling the trigger, if they due to damage, weak springs,
But that's a
poor light.
hypothetical. That's not a real thing.
Of course it is. That's what all tests are, testing hypothetical theories on what's going on. I think the problem that most people had that they saw in the gun and in the test that I had was the amount of movement in that slide for a striker fired handgun is not
Well, I think
acceptable.
that they don't understand that it's an FCU gun, meaning the frame is not connected to the slide.
Mhm.
I used to have a Beretta that was the same thing. It was the Nano, and you could do the same thing. You could click, 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 but it wasn't moving with the FCU and the slide weren't moving independent of each other. They were both moving independent of the frame.
Oh yeah, that's not doing it on this gun. And now that you mention it, see, I'm open to trying all this stuff.
Mhm.
I will take the FCU out of that gun, and if I need to, I'll make another video. I'll put it in there and move it. And again, the other two guns that I have similar movement. I don't think it's as much as that one gun, but the other P320s have similar amount of slide movement, and they don't exhibit that problem. So,
But like I
but
said, to kind of sum up a little bit here towards the end,
yeah,
the only thing I have an
that be
issue with
2 hours.
yeah, the only thing
Okay.
I have an issue with is those types of tests are fun, and you could show that if this happened, if the sear was bad, this could happen. But unless you show, hey, sears are turning bad, it's like all the guns that have been involved in the shootings so far
Mm-hmm.
have all been tested for the court cases, and they found no damage to the guns, no reason that they wouldn't work the way they're supposed to work. So we're not seeing real world examples of sears not connecting correctly or being damaged or having ledges or someone having polished them or anything like that. The guns that are being presented to the court cases, and in the court cases, the ones that actually were involved in the shooting and the ones that they submit as part of their testing groups, all function normally. They don't have a problem with sears disengaging. It never happens unless you pull the trigger 90% of the way. And that can simulate if it had this problem. But that's like saying, well, if I push my gas pedal down far enough, it simulates I have a runaway car. But I don't really have a runaway car. I'm pushing the gas pedal down. So there's a methodology problem there that we can't really solve. There's no way to solve it, because unless we find a gun that went off negligently, and then study it and go, this gun has a broken sear. That hasn't happened yet. In fact, it's the opposite in every one of them. Even the Bloomberg trial, they took a certain number of guns, couldn't get any of them to do anything bad. And then SIG offered them, we'll give you as many guns as you want, because they said in their court case, well, it's because we only had 12 guns or something like that. If we had more guns, we'd be able to find a one that didn't work. SIG said, we'll allow you to go to any dealer and take every gun from their inventory, and we'll pay for it, if you want to test them. And they wouldn't do it because they knew they weren't going to be able to recreate the problem. So the very fact that the only time we would have enough evidence to panic would be if one of the guns went off, like one of the ones in the police holsters, and then they found that gun's not functioning properly. We can take it back out and recreate that. Then there's a problem.
I believe that's what the FBI report stated. And then in figure, again, it's in my video tomorrow. If you go in figure 11 and 12, shows uneven wear and I believe damage to the sear.
Yeah, but it doesn't show that would actually cause the problem, because there's always some sort of wear. They were making a hypothetical still. Now, they claimed they made it fail 30% of the time, but they don't tell you how. They don't tell you at all how. They say that, they basically say, yeah, if you have a sear and the other surface are locking up and there's inconsistent wear, that could be consistent with, and they use the word could be consistent with, meaning we can't show that it is, but it's possible of this. And then they go on and later say, well, we were able to make it fail 30% of the time. I'd have to see them show that, because like I said, the vice test shows that that's not very likely, that safety is going to fail 30% of the time. I can't even make it fail 1% of the time. So for them saying we did it 30, but then given no details whatsoever, means that report is absolutely useless.
But you
there's
have
no definition.
Size.
There's no definitions. There's no explanation of method. There's no explanation of anything that you would need for that to actually be a viable experiment. It's just a couple of guys with the FBI saying, hey, while we were playing with it, we were able to make it fail 30% of the time. They don't even say the way we did it was checking by taking out the return spring, activating it, and see if it came through. Even if they just said that, I would have thought, well, maybe they knew what they were doing. They don't even say that. They could have done that test very easily. They don't say they did. They don't say what they did. They don't say how it failed. They don't say anything. They just say, we were able to make it hang up or fail. That could have just been a hang up. Like after they manually fired it, it could be stuck. they could count that as, oh, that's a failure. No, it's not. If you're manually manipulating things, you've probably gunked something up or fucked with something. So their test is useless. I mean, it's absolutely useless. Any test that says, yes, all these things are possible, we were never able to replicate these things that would be an actual test. But then they do a vague statement like, we were able to overcome the safety 30% of the time. But no methodology, no nothing. That's useless. It's worthless.
Well, it's kind of similar to airplane crashes and airplane investigators. They have to theorize what happened because they have to dig through all the wreckage, and they're not going to replicate. And nobody says, go get an airplane and put this lever here, do that, and then crash into the ground, and we'll see if it's real.
Because they'll find,
they could do it with computer models and stuff.
Well, they'll go find, they'll be like, oh, this little cross beam that holds the engine in place is burnt through, it's seared through. That wouldn't have even happened in a crash. Now let's go check those cross beams on other planes. Oh, look, 30% of them are burnt halfway through. So they do real testing like that, and they do show their methodology. The FBI showed no methodology, didn't even give an explanation after they did all their modeling. They just said, oh, we were able to make it, not work properly 30% of the time. Well, what does that mean? It means nothing. And that's the kind of things people say when they don't have any information really to give. And these FBI people were under pressure to put out a bad report. And that's the worst they could do. That doesn't tell me much. And the only thing I ever had, the only real problem I had with anything is like when you say, don't buy them till we know. Well, that's exactly what Bloomberg wants you to do, because not buy them and until you know means that when you finally do know, you're like, oh, there was nothing wrong with the gun, but the company's out of business because
no. I said don't sell the ones you have because of potential problems to people that might not be.
Oh, I thought you meant don't sell them in stores.
No. Your personal ones. Your personal ones, because if something does happen,
unless you don't like that person,
I respectfully disagree with you, sir. I put a lot of weight behind the FBI report, and I think this is real. I think it is very rare and intermittent. But I think
I'm just curious. Why would anyone trust the FBI?
They don't got a great track record, right?
Really.
None of our government has a great track record.
And if you look at the study, if a scientist came out tomorrow and told you guns cause cancer, and their methodology was extremely flawed. They didn't explain how they got to their result. And they said, hey, 40% of the people we studied that had guns had cancer. Mm-hmm. But they don't create a methodology. They don't create a testable, verifiable system or anything like that.
I don't think there's anybody else out there besides the FBI. I mean, we can't have SIG investigate themselves. They're like the government and they'll say, we investigated ourselves and we found nothing, So you can't have SIG investigate.
But we've had lots of court cases where professionals have came in and investigated them and found nothing.
Right. And I think, and they have settled and lost some of those. They
only lost one. And why did they lose it?
Oh, because
they don't put a
dingus thing. Right.
But they were able, the Bloomberg guy was able to convince a jury that because SIG didn't dummy proof the gun, it's their fault that a dummy did something stupid with it. That's like saying, hey, these people who make dynamite didn't say, don't put it in your mouth and light it. So therefore they're responsible because that guy put it in his mouth and lit it. That was the basis of that whole case. They convinced the jury that because SIG didn't put safeties on it that would prevent an idiot from misusing it, that it was SIG's fault. And I don't like that precedent whatsoever because revolvers don't have safeties.
The safety is the double action because it's so heavy.
Yeah, but they didn't put a trigger bar in there to prevent you from pulling it when you didn't.
And some of those old lemon squeezers had the grip safety on them and stuff.
Yes, so I hate those things.
Yeah, but I don't know who else would be able to investigate it that has a forensic firearms unit. They're not perfect. But
unfortunately, the people that can afford to investigate it or can afford to promote stories are the anti-gunners that make a lot of money off this and have an agenda to wipe out the manufacturers. Unfortunately, they're the ones that can afford to do a lot of it. Well, and when you got groups like, advertising groups like Leviathan, et cetera, that really spoons feeds a lot of the information to gun channels, that's a problem. especially when they start taking money from sources like that. And then you got a lot of gun channel people that are clearly just sucking up to the big gun tubers. They just want to repeat what they say. They don't even bother to see if what that tuber say is logical. They don't bother to test and see if it, passes the true test, or anything. They just, hey, I like this guy. I want him to like me, so I'm going to repeat his opinion.
I'm sure that happens a lot, but that goes back to my other point that because on the other side, paid shields by SIG, like the GBRS group and these guys that are running out here
really
saying
pay YouTubers though. That's one of the reasons I know some
SIG
YouTubers
pays him. SIG pays GBRS group to run out there and say there's nothing absolutely wrong unless I have my arms crossed and it's going off. It ain't real. I don't want to.
That's their public affairs. That's their own public affairs. That's what they're supposed to do. But the anti-gunners, they pay advertising groups to pay gun tubers to say bad things that will hurt the gun industry, will hurt gun manufacturers, specific gun manufacturers. And it wasn't hard to get them to do it on SIG because I know a channel, a very big channel that everybody knows, who admitted to me that he don't like SIG and he's going to trash them because they wouldn't pay him or give him free guns to test.
See, I got none of that. I don't. I was just independent dude in my garage trying to figure it out. I don't make no money on my channel. If you go back to my channel, I've had 3 years. I think I think there are paid shills by SIG and advertisers that run out and do positive videos of SIG. I think there are people that do, like you mentioned. I'm not dismissing what you said. I believe you that do anti-SIG hits against them. And I think most people in the middle are trying to sit there and figure out what's going on. And some of us YouTubers feel that SIG is stonewalling the public and everybody else, claiming, I believe, making bold claims that our SIG P320 is perfect and absolutely, and they put it in all caps, absolutely cannot go off without. Well, I think video evidence and some of the other stuff, I personally believe the video evidence that I see lends to,
they said cannot go off without activating the trigger, without actuating the trigger, putting pressure on the trigger. Have you seen a video where you can say the gun went off without pressure on the trigger?
Well, I've seen several of the body cam footage and stuff like that, like the cop getting out of the car and he's like, what the hell? And it goes off, bang.
You didn't see the gun though, did you?
Well, no, because it's on his body cam, but you can hear it go off.
And, right. You can hear him. And what do you hear right before it? You hear him drawing the gun. That's what I hear on it. In fact, a lot of people pointed that out. You hear him you hear plastic against gun as he's getting out. Could very easily be him drawing the gun. And the fact the gun went off and he dropped it when it went off, that means it probably wasn't in his holster.
The state trooper getting out of a car?
Yeah, that was getting out of the car. He dropped the gun after it went off.
Maybe we're talking about two different.
But no, I'm talking about the guy who you just see his body
out there, though.
And he gets out of the car, it goes off, and he's like, "My fucking gun shot me." And then when you see,
oh no, we're talking about two different, because this guy didn't get shot. It just went off in his car and put a hole in the seat.
Oh, that's a different one.
Yeah. And I don't remember what exactly it was. But at what point? Okay, I think gun people are very emotionally invested in their brand, their purchases. Sometimes car people are the same. So when they're with them being emotionally invested in that stuff, I think somebody wants no nonsense, absolute full video of something doing it and explaining the whole thing. And I don't think we'll ever get that. But at what point did eyewitness testimony not be good enough? It's still good enough in court.
Always. And eyewitness testimony is the least reliable form of proof in a court case.
But it is proof, because there's one of the very first channels, I think his name is Gungus or something. He explains, he does a video where he explains he's shooting a match. He reholsters. He's coming up with his hands. There was 3 people. The scorekeeper. Yeah, there was
a lie. And his hands were not up in the air when the gun fired. That's bullshit.
They interviewed the witnesses on it and went off and hit it. You're talking about the guy that
are the number one least reliable.
They went off and hit his knife and you're talking about that guy.
They will repeat what they were told when they didn't see it, just because they thought they see it. Because I had my hands in the air when it went off, and they'll be like, "Well, I guess he had his hands in the air when it went off." eyewitness testimony. I'm a psychologist. That's one of the things I did when I had one of the reasons I have so much experience with court cases. A lot of people think, oh, you talk about the law like you like. No, I've been in a lot of courtrooms because I was an expert witness quite a bit, mostly in child custody cases, etc. But one of the things any of us will tell you, eyewitness testimony is the least reliable form of evidence because people will convince themselves that they saw what they wanted to see or what someone else told them they wanted to see. It's like recovered memories. There's no evidence that recovered memories are a thing. There's called recreated false memories because people are convinced that they remember when they were 7, their great uncle raped them in a fishing boat. And then their own family will be like, you never even met your uncle till you were 12.
Right.
So it's eyewitness testimony is worthless. And one of the things I'm not actually a proponent of the SIG P320. I have no purchase. Like I got to defend my purchase because I sold them because I didn't like them. I thought they were unsafe and I sold them. So I have no devotion to them. What I have a problem with is people engaging in questionable methodology to come to unsubstantiated conclusions and then engaging in groupthink and group mentality. There's so many people out there that think they've seen videos of SIGs just going off sitting on tables.
Oh, no, that's no.
Or it was just in his holster and he's standing there with his hands behind his head and it's in his holster and it just goes off. You haven't seen that at all, but there's a lot of them because of the groupthink, the group mentality, and like I said, the desire to belong with the people, the people in, the know that are just saying that. They think they've seen it. I've had so many people in my comment section say, there's a video that clearly shows the guy had it, like the one you're talking about. Yeah. The video clearly shows he had his hands in the air when the gun went off. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. You never saw that video because it doesn't exist. So it's like the Mandela effect. You think it exists.
So one thing I have to reiterate. I never said that I came to a conclusion in my video. I just want to make that clear. I said, is this at the end, if you watch again, I said, is this what's going on with this gun, guys? I asked the question. I didn't say, this is what's going on. I have solved it. I never claimed that. I've never claimed that in my case. So that's one.
I understand your point, but the Tucker Carlson defense is not always the best defense to have.
I personally believe through the evidence that I have seen, that there is enough smoke there, that there's fire. That's my personal belief. We can disagree with that. You haven't seen enough video evidence to convince you. I have seen overwhelming in my mind, and my opinion is that I have witnessed enough body cam, surveillance video, eyewitness testimony, and all the reports, and home garage Smith gun tubers going down different rabbit holes trying to see if this is an issue. Not hating SIG. Again, I own 5 SIGs. I have no.
Well, yeah, but the people that are going down these rabbit holes are going down these rabbit holes because it's profitable. You get views on. Well, how many views do you have on that video that you did?
I don't even know. I think it's over 500,000 now.
Yeah, and what's your normal count on a video?
It depends on the video. Colts get pretty good at videos. Pretty good views. I don't even know. An average is usually in a month. I usually get about 250 to 300,000 views.
You mean for each video?
Oh no! Overall for the whole channel. I'm sorry.
But you got more than twice that on just that one video.
Right.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of people do those videos. And the bad news sells. Good defending them doesn't sell. Tearing them down sells because there's a lot of Glocktards out there that hate SIG. There's a lot more
Glocks too. I own 6 Glocks right now.
There's a lot more Glock people that hate SIG than there are SIG lovers that defend SIG no matter what. There's very few of those. But there's a lot of people who don't like SIG. And there's a lot of people that want to get on the good side of the big channels that are bashing SIG. And I caution you on one type of defense, though. I'm just here. I show you all these things, and then I'm just asking the question because that's like me saying, based on my evidence, I have found that Wyoming Gun Project, likes midget prostitutes.
You break it up there.
like I said, I could say
Uh,
based on what I'm discovered, and I'm just asking the question, because I've had the question asked to me, does Wyoming Gun Project like midget prostitutes? I'm
it
not saying
depends.
it. I'm just
No,
asking a
I'm kidding.
question. That's not
It
fair.
depends. It depends on the. No, I'm
Yeah,
kidding.
exactly. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I mean, who doesn't like
Right.
midget
But
prostitutes?
that's your thing.
But oh, not just whose thing isn't it is what I would say. But I don't even want to defend SIG, period. If I ever found out the gun was defective, I'd be the first person making a video saying, here's what I found out. This is how this gun is defective. And they
Yeah.
proved it
Well,
to
if you
me.
go back through my videos, like I said, I've done about half a dozen on this since the March 7th thing. And I have never in my videos been like, F SIG, let's bring SIG down, destroy them, all that other stuff. I'm fully aware that if SIG completely goes out of business, there's going to be thousands of American workers that are going to lose their job. But if this is a real thing, it's not anti-gun people that are getting shot by these guns. It's pro-gun people that carry these guns that are being injured and killed and stuff like that. So I also, on the other hand, don't stick your head in the sand and be like, nothing is happening at all. I don't want to hear it. Hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil.
You mentioned earlier you're old,
Yes, sir.
like I am.
Yes.
So you remember the Glock when Glock was
Oh,
having so much trouble. And you
absolutely.
remember the FBI put out a report saying that they were wholly unsafe.
Yes.
And
And
you
Glock.
remember that police departments were having that their negligent discharge injuries from negligent discharges jumped from like 3 a year to 70 or 80 or
Yes.
90 a year.
And they
And they
determined
were
that, I think they determined, correct me if I'm wrong, but that a lot of those officers, especially the New York police, which is why they came out with the New York trigger, transitioned from revolvers where they used to run with their finger on the trigger, which is not advisable, but it's pretty safe with a revolver. They got a 14, 15-pound trigger pull on a
yeah, they
service
were pulling the
Smith and
trigger.
Wesson revolver. Yeah. Where they were having the same habit with running with the Glocks, and it was like boom. So they put in, I think it was what, 12-pound New York trigger or
10
something
or
like that,
12, I
8-pound,
forget, but
12, something like that.
which
I
is why I
absolutely
said
remember
stick
that.
to the gun.
And I remember when Glocks, I actually witnessed it myself, and I actually witnessed it at a place called Shooter's Paradise in Woodbridge, Virginia, which is no longer there, burnt down. I was learning to get into USPSA. This is late 90s. Somebody was shooting a Glock 22 in 40, and they had a catastrophic failure of the case, and it blew the gun up. I was right there. I was 10 feet from it, saw it with my own eyes. Glock for years denied that wasn't a problem. No, it's not unsupported cases. What are you talking about? It's the ammo, it's this, that. So I agree, they all do that. But I witnessed it for myself that no, a 40 caliber case blew the crap out of a Glock 22 right in front of my eyes. Was watching the guy shoot, boom, and I was like, oh, everybody's like, oh, blew the slide right off
Was
it.
he shooting regular ammo or handmade
I
ammo?
think he was shooting factory ammo.
You think? So
Because
you don't
because
know.
back in the day, they used to make us
Do
in
you know
that
what
area.
but do you know what that witness testimony would be worth to anyone who was actually trying to do a true investigation? It'd be zero, but you don't know enough about the details. It's
Right.
just like that gun from the guy you sold. You don't think he ever modified it or polished it internal? He could have taken it apart one day and said, "Oh, that's dirty," and rubbed it with a piece of emery
Well,
for all you
I
know.
would agree with you if, like I said, if I didn't know the man for 20 years, I knew him for 20 years. I was intimately familiar with him, and
I don't
like I
know
said, if I was
anybody
able to
long
bring
enough
my
to know
friends
that
in here, they'd say Gigi he didn't have enough. I'm not trying to insult the man, but he didn't have enough mechanical G2 to mess with stuff. He just wouldn't do it.
well, idiots are the ones that do the most harm sometimes. But like I was saying, I don't want to defend SIG. I don't care about SIG. I don't like the P320. What I don't like is groupthink. I don't like people having their minds poisoned by companies that have a monetary interest in doing it. I don't like gun channels that participate in it when it hurts the gun community and hurts the gun industry. And I don't like people who throw methodology to the wind when it suits them.
Do you
If
do
you do
you
a test
not
where
like groupthink on both sides? Would you submit that you don't like groupthink of people saying
I
it
like
is
groupthink on our side.
absolutely not happening, and then the other groupthink is saying, oh, here's the complete evidence of
No, I want people to say a gun going off on its own is incredibly unlikely. So until I see evidence that's a proper methodology system, it's got testable variables, it's got repeatable variables, it's got controls. Until I see that, I'm not going to believe an outrageous claim. You know, an extraordinary claim requires extraordinary evidence. That's the first rule of investigation. You know, people always love to say it's always the last person you suspect. No, as someone who was an investigator, it's usually the first person you
expect. What's
because
that
that's
called?
just how
Occam's
things are.
razor? Or
Yeah.
it's
And if
usually
something is unlikely, if a claim comes to you that is unlikely, like if someone said, "Yeah, my wife just got shot by my shotgun. It was sitting on the bed and my dog jumped on it and went off," you'd be like, "That's unlikely." I would have to see evidence to show that, and we'd have to be able to repeat it, you know, because you're probably lying. So anytime I see, as a former investigator and as a psychologist, which also uses the same very similar methodology in diagnosing and, you know, everything else, you can't skip steps. You can't simulate steps in a way that it itself would be dangerous. It's like I can't say, well, symptom number one would be if this person tends to get agitated, you know, during blank. And then I went over and said, well, I can't really get them agitated, but I'm going to poke them with a pen. Now they're agitated. So now I can throw the second test at them. It's like, if when they're agitated, do they tend to stammer? You know, so they didn't get agitated on their own, but I'm poking them with a pen. Now they're agitated. And look, they're stammering. So that probably means I can go on to the next section. No, I already faked one of the parts, so I can't do that. So that's my main problem with most of the people that are bashing the P320. They should just be like, hey, let's see what the court cases say. None of the court cases are being able to show that a single gun misfired, that a single gun was out of operating parameters. We got a bullshit report from the FBI that says nothing. And every other test of the gun has shown, yeah, we can't, none of this stuff will happen. We've never been able to make a gun go off without the trigger being pulled.
Well, there's still a lot of cases pending. That's one. And this is where, again, you and I differ.
There's
Again,
like a total of 12, was it 12 cases?
I thought it was 22. I'm not sure.
It might be 22.
It's still pending,
12
maybe.
22. The Glock cases, you know how many Glock cases were pending at one time?
Oh, probably a bunch.
It was 200 and something.
Right. I think where also I think because there's another channel of a man that helped set up Dick Fairburn. He helped set up the Illinois State Police firearms thing when they selected the Glock, and he goes and he tells the story about how he had issues with the Glock, and Glock was very proactive to come out, fix it, and stuff like that. I don't think a lot of people would have a problem with SIG if it was perceived that they jumped out in front of this and attempted to help and clear this up.
Well, you might be right.
I think a lot of people feel, and I'm one of those, that SIG went on the offensive and attacked us, the gun owners and the SIG owners.
So I didn't take it as an attack on me because
I didn't get
what they said. I agreed with. I'm like, yeah, it doesn't go off unless you pull the trigger. I haven't seen any evidence otherwise. I didn't see it as an attack on me. Now, however, I thought the way they could have dealt with it better to settle most people, like I told you already. Hey, anybody that wants their gun pumped up to a 10-pound trigger, will do it. Just send us the gun. You'll get back the gun with a 10-pound trigger.
Agreed. That might have quieted the whole thing. Because that to me was being proactive.
Yeah, you know? And that would have been okay, and they could have done that. But unfortunately, the anti-gun groups and the big talking heads on YouTube got in there and started pushing the false narrative that guns are just going off. They're in a proper holster. It's not, the trigger's not being touched, and they're just going off. They're laying on tables and they're just going off. The reason people think that is because they've been told that by people. They have put a concentrated effort into creating a false narrative, creating their own Mandela effect, and people fell for it because they tend to do that. We're herd mentality people. And because of that, making the trigger heavier wouldn't have solved the problem of guns just going off in holsters or just sitting on tables. They would still have another problem. I don't think that means they shouldn't have done that. They should have done that because at least they would have done something. But it wouldn't have solved the problem, unfortunately, because you'd still have this false narrative of guns are failing. Guns are going off on their own. Guns are being found to have been defective. Not a single gun has been found to be defective, period.
Well, and I got another question for you. Why is it always, we don't have any surveillance footage, body cam footage, nothing out there of M&Ps going off, Glocks going off?
Remember the guy in the pawn shop that shot him when he bent over and shot himself in the groin with his carry gun?
What was that? Which one was that?
The guy in the pawn shop who was talking to a customer, goes over, bends over, and picks something up off the floor, shoots himself. Well, he doesn't actually, I don't think he actually injures himself too much. It just nicks him, but it goes off when he bends over. That's a Glock.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah, I don't know the details of that. Are the details out on that one? I heard, now don't quote me, I'm not saying this is fact, but I heard that he had aftermarket modified parts in that gun. I don't know.
That makes more sense.
I don't know if that's the case. Yes.
But people didn't run screaming to the wind that, aha, video evidence that Glocks are dangerous. That video showed as much about that Glock as any of the videos show about a P320. And there's far more videos of people doing that with Glocks, having NDs. There's far more cases. If you do research into the number, I did a video once where I talked about negligent discharges and how often that it's because of people have fatalities because they were carrying appendix. And the vast majority of the guns involved in those cases was Glock, because Glock was the number one selling polymer gun at the time. So in 7 out of 10 of the cases where people were severely injured, it was a Glock. No one made it about Glock because there wasn't this ongoing groupthink about Glock at the time. Now, the SIG P320 is the most common gun. So it makes sense that most negligent discharges now would be with SIG P320s. There hasn't been a great increase in numbers of NDs, period. People make this false claim that, oh, the Army and the Air Force and the police departments have had a 200% increase in NDs. No, they haven't. Their internal reports show there's been zero change. So that doesn't support that claim that the P320s are dangerous after they switch to them if there's zero change in the numbers of people that are actually hurting themselves. So it's got to be something else, or it's more likely something else. And when you got big money interest behind the idea of making it, let's make it seem like it's the gun. It's not you. You'll get off the hook because it won't have been you that was the problem. It'll be the gun. And that's what we're seeing. We're not seeing any like increased rates of NDs. We're not seeing any increased cases of people. And especially, what about the 2.5 million Glocks that are in the hands of people other than police? Why are 9 out of 10 cases police? Yep.
With the 9 out of 10 cases with the P320, or?
Yeah.
I think a theory. I think because of the massive amount in the example that I have of movement between the two pieces as it's riding in a holster can contribute to that being a possibility. Now, I was going to say something else early.
But what I'm asking is, why is it just happening to police?
I don't know. I'm not going to say the videos I've seen. Now, listen, early on in I've had NDs myself. Maybe you have spent enough yeah, right. You have spent enough time around guns.
Anybody that's never had an ND isn't really a shooter.
Right. It's just like when I used to ride motorcycles, they said there's those that have crashed and like those who are going to crash, or whatever it was, but again, back to another point with like the Glock, I think that one might have been, again, don't quote me, heavily modified. I submit to you, if a lot of these P320s that were having issues, if they have modified competition triggers, light and sears, all this, I go, okay, that's not, I don't modify my guns anymore because of stuff like that, especially guns that I carry. They're factory, they're bone stock factory, because, and I train to them that instead of trying to buy things and upgrade things to make me a better shooter or whatever, I will train to the gun.
And even if you made changes to a gun you carried, it would only be a legal problem if you fired the gun unintentionally. Like if you deliberately drew your gun and shot someone point blank, it's not going to matter that you made the trigger lighter. You drew and deliberately shot point blank. All those cases of, oh, it showed you wanted to shoot someone because the trigger was lighter. No, those don't hold weight in court.
No. Yeah, no. I didn't say I did it because of court.
If you're like, I pulled my gun, but I didn't mean to pull it. I didn't mean to pull the trigger, but the trigger was so light that I did because I lightened it. Then you would have some liability.
Right. I wasn't not speaking about possible court cases or anything. I was speaking about it from a safety standpoint, because as far as, the only thing I would modify is maybe change the color and put sights on it or something like that on guns. But I know I'm weird when I do this. I even run the stock plastic Glock sights. I've never had a problem with them. I think most people, they buy a Glock, the first thing they do is kick them damn things off and put, new ones on. But
But I don't carry a Glock, so I do that.
yeah, yeah. So, yeah, I think that's where possibly we disagree. Is I put more weight than you do behind the FBI report. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying I definitely do not think the FBI is perfect, but I do believe that they're probably the best ones to do it at this point in time. And I see. It sounds
I
like
would
I
ask,
see the video evidence different than you do. I put a lot of more weight behind that. I think there's a lot of smoke, and where there's a lot of smoke, there's fire. And we will see in the future how all this turns out. Again, my point in all of this, and I think all the other YouTubers, not all, because you have pointed out that there are some that wish to damage or harm SIG. I don't want gun companies to go out of business.
but a lot of these companies, a
But
lot of these YouTubers
if
are okay with that.
Right. But if you are putting out a standard product that could possibly lead to injury, not due to overtly unsafe handling by people, I think they need to fix that. I think they
But
need to
that brings us
identify
right
and
back to,
fix it.
you think it's been proven that they're putting out a subpar product that will cause harm to
Say that again.
people? Or do you think it's just if people that can't handle that gun might have a problem?
I think it's a mixture of both. I think there are people that are not, I think there are people that are not properly trained and do not have enough skill to operate to run that gun. I have seen plenty of people, and again, I shot my first USPSA match in 1997, so I've been doing it for almost 3 decades. I think, and we've seen plenty of new shooters that come out and they want to buy skill. I did a video on my channel about that, saying the best way, if you want to become very proficient with a handgun in general, shoot a revolver, double action. Go out there and train your ass off with a revolver
That's what
and
I've always told people.
yeah, and
Single
only shoot a
target.
double action, because you have to pull. You will see all your mistakes. You will see your flinching, your healing. You will notify because you're pulling through that long pull. If you take a 1911 right out, you're just going to be like bang, 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 because the trigger's so short, so much easier to shoot those. There's a lot less room for human error in your trigger pull.
Learning to
So
shoot with a revolver is like learning to drive on a stick shift. If you can drive a
yes,
stick shift, you can drive an automatic.
and I still love stick shifts. All my
But it's
Corvettes
not
were
the other
stick
way
shifts.
around.
Yeah,
Yeah, I prefer
absolutely,
stick shift.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So to say that, a lot of people, we've seen it before, and I've been victim of it when I was early on, is we attempt to, especially in the competition world, we attempt to buy skill. Let me throw this trigger in. Let me throw these sights on. Let me throw this dot on. All that kind of stuff. I can buy my way up in skill when actually you should be on the range, firing live ammunition or dry firing
No, I don't want to
safely,
do
of course,
that.
in your,
So I don't do that.
Oh
I don't
yeah, no,
ever
you
fire
don't
my
do
gun.
that. Yeah, yeah, I saw that the focus trip thing with you and Randy. That got a little out of hand. I'm not like I, I do not.
He's got a grudge or something. I love that whole "you don't shoot." I'm like, well, how would you have any knowledge of that? Whether I did or I didn't. And I have a range on my property.
Yeah, me
Uh,
too.
my son shoots all the time. I shoot like once, twice a week. Now, I will say there's times I say where I haven't shot in a month, especially like in the winter when it's rainy and nasty. I'll say I haven't shot at all this month.
Yeah, it's real tough out here in the winter. That's why I
Yeah.
usually try to film as much as I can when it's nice weather, and then I stage the videos out because I'll get some people say, "What the hell, bro? This is December. Why is it sunny?" Well, because
Yeah.
they don't understand how it works because I
Yeah.
filmed it in
Because in
July.
December, I've got 3 feet of snow on the ground in
Yeah,
my
yeah,
range.
me
Yeah.
too.
So I'm like, I can't do that. And I don't want to. I don't like filming at the range, period, because it makes it not fun for me down there. It makes it a job. Like, oh, did I get that in the shot, or did I have that frame properly, or
It
did
is definitely a
oh
lot more work because I do film a lot of the range footage.
yeah. And plus I think it's boring. I think watching a person shoot's like scratching your ass. It's nice when you do it, but it's not so
Right,
fun to watch somebody else do it.
right. Some
Uh,
people listen. Some people love that. I don't understand. My kids do that. They watch other people play video games.
I
I'm
do
like, why are
too.
you watching a guy play video games on YouTube? You have video games. Go play them.
Yeah,
No,
go
this
play
is
that. You
cooler.
have that game. Go play
Yeah.
it.
Yes. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I'll leave you alone. You know.
Yeah.
So.
But so that's my only point. That's what I'd make you want to understand
Mhm.
is that if you can do the same thing with a revolver, like we showed that you can do with the P320, that would mean that's probably not an issue of the P320. That's something that happens with guns that are designed like that. A short single action trigger on that, single action trigger on the P320. That would be be careful. If you put any pressure on the trigger, you can have a problem with the hammer. So I don't really think that shows proof of a bad gun. It shows proof that if you do make the first mistake of putting finger on the trigger, all bets are off, especially with a gun that is that unforgiving. But like I said, you fix that by doing a heavier trigger.
Right. I was going to say, if that's the case, then if that is the case, then that the scenario you just presented, don't you think that firearm manufacturers, because I have firearms that don't exhibit that much slop that can allow the trigger and the sear to release, have an obligation to make sure their tolerances are a lot tighter, or like you said, increase the sear surface, make the striker safety.
They do. I think that they can, just like I think manufacturers can make cars that if you push the gas, you might go spinning into a ditch. No, we don't put governors on those cars. We just say certain people shouldn't buy those cars. Same thing with the SIG. I think they have every right to put out a race car gun. The P320 is a race car gun. And if people that shouldn't be driving anything other than a Honda Civic buy one and have a problem, well, that's not the gun's problem. That's the operator's problem.
I agree with you. I agree with you. It's a race car gun. But then here's another point that might be relevant. SIG has marketed this gun as a duty weapon because they sold it to the Army. The Army has duty go-to-war weapons, not competition weapons. They sold it as a police officer duty weapon. They've sold it as they have competition models too.
That's another part of how I think they fell victim to the tacti-tard mentality, because that also, the tacti-tard mentality is also, who are the greatest people in the world? The military and law enforcement. And if this gun's good for them, then I can handle it too, because they're the best. They're not the best. They're the worst, actually, in most cases. Be a range officer in the Army, or talk to a range officer in the Army and listen to how they're like, 90% of these morons are going to kill themselves if they stay in more than 4 years. So they're not. And I think SIG produced a gun that a lot of people thought they wanted, but they can't handle, marketed it to the people they know would make those people want it more, and then probably, like you said, didn't deal with it well when people figured out that I can't handle this gun, but I'm going to blame the gun.
Yeah, it could be some of that too. Like I said, I never said, this is the definitive, we proved that they're aliens type of thing. So,
but it did in a way. Like I said,
aliens, I personally believe.
I'm just asking the question. If I had done that testing, just to tell you what I would have done differently, if I would have done that testing, I would have said, listen, look, you can make this gun go off without fully pulling the trigger. If you pull it back 95% and you do this, it'll go off. So that would show that if that gun's in a holster and that trigger is being pushed back a certain degree, if you're running and that gun and that holster doesn't hold that gun perfectly steady, it can go off. If you go to draw it,
I agree with that theory. That could be, yeah.
And that's how I would have presented that. And only as that. And then I would have explained, but that's true of almost every gun, even single action revolvers. If you put them under the same condition, you can overcome the sear because you've done 95% of the work already. Safeties don't work when they're already 95% removed most of the time.
Except that with like Berettas and stuff like that.
Well, Beretta safety completely.
The safety tilts out. Absolutely. It's got a two-piece firing pin here. But look, again, I did another video where I said, I believe the Beretta M9 series of handguns is the safest handgun. Yeah. One of the safest, if not the safest handgun out there, because you can do everything on that gun with the safety on, not the decocker model, the safety on. You can load it, unload it, disassemble it, reassemble it, all that, all with the safety on. You never need to take the safety off of that gun unless you are ready to fire. But if you're walking around with that safety off and it on single action, which that did happen. So I used to work at Quantico for the Marine Corps. I did one hitch in the Army. I did 17 years working as a DOD civilian for the Marine Corps. We had armed guards in our building. I left before they got the M18. They had M9 Berettas. And these people were
in military intelligence. We got M9s.
Yeah, you got M9s. I was on tanks when I was in the Army. We got M9s. So I'm very familiar with the M9. I can run an
I never
M9.
touched a rifle other than qualifying on the range my entire time in the military.
Yeah, we had one rifle per tank, and it was the loader's, responsibility to take
Yeah.
care of that. Otherwise, all other 4 crewmen had M9s. But we had several people torch one off in the clearing barrel. You were in the Army, you know what a clearing barrel is. Yet,
Mhm.
you're
I
supposed
have
to
one right
unload.
here. I
Yeah,
got one
it
right
clear.
there.
Right.
Yeah.
So they would torch them off in the clearing barrel, and we knew because they would go to a basic M9 class, and us gun guys would be like, they are not. These are regular people. They're not gun enthusiasts. They're not very savvy on the use of these handguns, and they would inevitably, a couple times a year, whatever, torch one off in the clearing barrel with the M9. But if it was used properly in double action, like I explained, you would never ever have a problem. They were trained properly. They're like, oh, rack it, load it, let it go, and the hammer would be back like that. We had one female Marine, not trying to disparage them, but she was walking around there. One of their jobs was to walk the floors and just check stuff as security. And my buddy and I were looking
Yeah.
at her, and she had the hammer back, safety off. And we're like,
Mhm.
whoa, don't move. Because we know what's going on here. Like, let's walk over to the clearing barrel and let's decock that gun because you're walking around with a firearm in an unsafe condition right
Yeah.
now that was not meant to be carried that way.
And right now, if I took one of my Berettas off the wall and I cocked the hammer, didn't decock it, and there's no safety, it's just cocked. You have to decock those before you carry them. If I just cocked it and didn't decock it, the trigger weight on that gun in that single action format with the hammer cocked is heavier than the SIG P320.
Mm-hmm.
It's like 6 pounds. So it's heavier and it has more movement. It takes longer of a pull to make it move. It's not 2/10 of an inch. It's more like 1/3 of an inch.
Because I think they designed that gun as like a duty go to war gun. They looked at the excuse me, flaws with the 1911, not just capacity and stuff like that, but they said, how do we make this sucker? I don't know this for a fact, but just looking at the way the pistol was designed, I think they designed it with safety in mind to be a very, very inherently safe firearm. And I don't think there has ever been one claim substantiated, again, not one, or video, but that was the time of no video of it going off in the holster because of rattling. And obviously, it's a hammer fire gun, so if you shook the slide, it wouldn't affect how the sear and striker.
I mean, it can because hammers are still held back by a sear, but yeah, it's definitely, it was designed for what duty used to be. Used to be when you design something for duty, you had to say, well, what is something that competent officers can use, but our stupidest officer won't kill himself with?
Yeah, it's got to be designed to the lowest common denominator.
Yeah, and that's how he designed it. Like I said, SIG went with the whole tacti-tard mentality of like, military people are operators and they need an operator's gun. Cops are operators and they need an operator's gun. It's the exact opposite. They're the last people that should have operators' guns. And so are most of the people who think
that's
they're
the case.
operators.
Now they're paying for it. Now that
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. They designed a gun they shouldn't have designed. Even though people said they wanted it, they should have known people aren't going to be able to handle it. But they didn't. But I still don't blame SIG as much as I do the idiots that think they can handle it and can't. You know what I mean? Like I said, if I build a lot of people can't drive a Corvette. If they got in a Corvette, 15 minutes later, they'd be in a ditch or around a tree because they just don't have the skill to moderate the throttle, to steer properly, to maintain the stability when the back end kicks out. But that you don't blame the car when someone wraps it around a tree. Every time some influencer, some 17, 18-year-old influencer goes out and buys a Maserati or something, a Porsche or a 911 or a Ferrari, and immediately within a week they're in a major crash. You don't blame the car. It was like an idiot bought a car they can't handle.
Right. But on the other side, there are certain Ferraris that are known to burst into flames because there's a YouTuber, I forget, they bought the Ferrari. It was a known issue, and they were driving it in California, burst into flames and burnt to the ground,
And
it's
it's a
like,
known issue after people have actually proved it in a way that is
yeah.
substantial.
And I think, again, don't quote me on this, but I think Ferrari didn't fix it, or it was unfixed, or for some reason it
They figured
wasn't
out how many people
corrected.
were burned to death, and is that cheaper than fixing the car?
Well, that's, again,
Like
that's
how
like the Pinto.
airlines do it. They're like, we can fix these mounts on our engines, or we can figure only one plane is going to go down every 10 years, and that's going to be 200 people. We can pay survivor benefits for 200
Yes,
people.
and the big pharma has done that with medication that has harmed people. They said, well, if we get a lawsuit, we could potentially make 12 billion on this. If we get a lawsuit, the most they can get us with is 4 billion. Let's roll the dice. Who cares?
Yeah.
Penta, the same thing with the Pinto. Again, you and I are
I own
roughly
a
the same
Pinto.
age. Gen X. Pinto, they found that internal document in the court cases that they could have put that $7 bracket in the back and fix that problem. They knew there was a potential, not a problem with every car, but a potential problem with the car. And they said, we'll only have to pay $50,000 per court case. Let's not put it in. But then the punitive damages nailed them.
So and I had a Pinto, actually. It's a green one. But we've been going for 2 hours, so we're going to sign off here. Okay, but I want to thank you for coming.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
You really fucked this up because you didn't call me.
Say again?
I said you kind of fucked this up because you didn't insult me once.
I know listen. Again, we're roughly you're Gen X, right? So we're from the same generation. I'm a big believer in civil discourse. I believe you get out there and you argue your point respectfully. There's no need for ad hominem attacks and stuff like that. Just because we disagree on what a specific gun might be, that's not. But so I get it. I try to keep it cool with everybody and just argue my position and not attack people personally. Yeah. But I know
my only issue was not with your findings, but with how they were interpreted by some people, and how I don't think it was clear enough to some people that if you didn't do A and B, C wouldn't happen. But we're simulating A and B, and then we're showing you C can happen under these conditions. People jump to C happens. So A, B, C happens. It's not what it showed at all. That's not how scientific method works. That's my main, and that's why I say I just want gun owners to be thinkers. I don't want them to do the work of the anti-gunners just because there's a little bit of money in it, or you might think your favorite YouTuber is going to notice you because you said the same thing they said, that kind of thing. So that's my only message to people. I don't give a shit about the P320. I don't think it's safe for carry because I think it is an operator's gun. It's a competition gun. It's not for duty. Most cops should never even see one, much less carry one. But it's not the gun's fault. It might be SIG's fault for thinking they should make that, but it's not the gun's fault. But like I said, thanks for coming. I appreciate it. If you want to do another video, get some of the videos of people with their guns going off. We could analyze them.
Okay, I think a channel, actually, before I go, I think a channel called Protraband dropped one a couple days ago about a mashup, a montage of all the body cams and surveillance and everything of it going off. So
yeah, and when you go through, the main thing in all of them is you don't really see anything.
I think it's some of them you do. You see well, if you're interested and go watch the video, I think it's Protraband is the channel. But
thanks for coming. I appreciate it.
Thanks
I
for
will
having me.
see you again next time. Until then, I want to say thanks to everybody out there.
Thanks, guys.
Though we didn't mean going 2 hours, but things happen. So I will see everybody tomorrow. Until then, remember, always carry and stay safe till we see you again. And everybody wave and say goodbye. Bye.